This is Broadcast Beat Magazine with Ryan Salazar.
Ryan Salazar here with Broadcast Beat Magazine. We have a special guest, Philip Grossman of PGP Images. He's the principal of PGP. How you doing, Philip?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. So tell us about your labor of love, if you will, about the project for Chernobyl.
Certainly. So the project started almost 5 years ago on the 25th anniversary. I had been working in corporate America for 7 years with the same company and sort of, decided I'd had enough. I was going to take a break. And I've been a fine art photographer for a long time, done, doc filmmaking. And so my girlfriend at the time, who's now actually my wife, encouraged me to take the time off and go do something around your fine art photography. So I went and I met with a couple, I was living in Atlanta at the time, met with the curator of the High Museum in Atlanta, met with some gallery owners, and they all sort of had the same response to my work. This is, your work is very, very good, but I don't see a cohesive body. And so, of course, the first thing I said is, what the heck do they mean by cohesive body? And so I started, I'm an engineer by training, so I put my engineer's hat on and said, okay, why is Annie Leibovitz more famous than Timothy Greenfield and other photographers? And it's sort of about content and context of the images. So I started thinking about, what do I want to do as my project? And just, the thought process was, I grew up near 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. My family is the last stop before coming to the United States was the Ukraine. And I've always had a fascination with nuclear energy. I was a Naval RTC scholarship recipient and actually started studying nuclear engineering, but realized that that's not what I wanted to do. So they all sort of came aligned. And so I started doing some research and found an individual who had been there 2 or 3 times and started chatting with him about I was going to take a day trip. I'd found some public tours at the time. Turns out that they had shut down the public tours, and none of the tour operators actually told me. But this individual said he was going back in November, and that he had a space for, he only takes professionals. I sent him my work. He says, you're a professional. I got 1 spot left if you want to go. I said, certainly. So he said, wire me $500. Now, it wasn't Western Union, so I wasn't worried. I talked to a friend of mine who's from Poland, where this individual lives. He says, yes, it's a bank. And so I, sent him the money and sent him the final payment a couple days before I was leaving, and flew to Kiev and toured a little bit prior to meeting up, and then met up with him and 8 a.m. in front of Hotel Rus, and we drove the 70 or 80 kilometers to Chernobyl and just dropped off our stuff and started shooting. And I thought it was a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Really became fascinated with the environment, the story. Came back to the States and said, okay, this is great. On that trip, I actually managed to get bribe my way into the control room of reactor number 4 where the accident happened. And thought that was great. I think, I've done this and now I can, focus on something else. And the individual who I'd gone with, named Eric, called me a couple months later and says, I'm going back. Do you want to go? I said, certainly, but only if we go for a longer period of time. And so I made my second trip, which was 8 days in the zone. And it was mainly photo, but I also shot a fair amount of video. And then we chatted while we were there about let's work together on a bigger film of some sort. And so we just kept going and going. We've now made 5 visits there. Have over 50 hours of material, nearly 50% of it or more in 4K, as well as 4K aerial. This last trip, DJI went along with me to document my use of their equipment in the zone, and flew about 25 miles with the drones covering a large area of the Chernobyl it's called the Zone of Exclusion. As well as this last trip, we also managed to not only gain access to the control room number 4 again, but also was provided very, very rare access to what's called the grand hall, or the main hall, which is the actual reactor of unit number 2.
It's really amazing. I'm on your website right now, just so everybody can check it out, exploringthezone.com. And I see a picture of you inside of reactor number 4. And I certainly don't really know anything about Chernobyl, but I'm curious, what happened in reactor number 4? Obviously, there was an explosion and a problem.
Yeah, so it's funny that people always ask me, what was the biggest mistake you ever made on the trip or in the project, or if you look back at what would you have done differently? And for me, it was the amount of research I did on my first trip. I sort of went really, really blind. I knew the basic concept of what had happened at the, as a result of the accident. Since then, I have read and digested just about every piece of information I can on what happened there, to the point where I now live in Denver, and down the road from where I live is the Colorado School of Mines. And I went and met with Dr. Jeffrey King, who is a nuclear engineer who specializes in reactor design and analysis, because I got to the point where I couldn't get any more answers just by searching the web and reading books. I had very specific questions. And so I sat down with him for 3 hours and learned more in 3 hours than I had, I think, in most of my research. So there's a lot of misinformation or unknown information out there. So basically what had happened was they were attempting to do an experiment where, and that experiment had been done at many other nuclear power plants within the former Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR. Effectively, when a nuclear power plant loses power, it has no more power for its cooling pumps, and the reactor heats up very, very quickly. So what they were doing is trying to see, could they use the rotational energy of the turbine and basically switch it back into the plant to run the cooling pumps until the diesel generators could come up to speed. All the other plants had done the same experiment, except it was all a sort of pretend experiment. They said, okay, let's pretend that the safety systems don't work. Let's pretend that this control system doesn't work. And can we make this happen? In Chernobyl, they actually disabled the safety systems, going against all safety protocols at the plant. To the point where there are large tanks of water that are used for emergency cooling of the reactor. It's gravity fed. That they chained those valves, control valves, so the water couldn't even get into the reactor, because they were afraid that cold water getting into a hot reactor, if by accident, because one of the control systems went off, emergency systems went off, could shock the reactor and damage the reactor. All of this stuff was sort of approved by the central government. If any of that stuff had been proposed in the States, it would have been, shut down immediately. So it was, completely a man-made error, but it's a larger issue of that sort of central planning that the former communist countries were known for. Very much the head of the plant there was not a nuclear engineer. He was a hydro engineer. He never worked in a nuclear power plant before he became the plant manager. So it was a lot of nepotism within the society. So, at the end of the day, what happened is the reactor got very, very unstable. And so you have a chain reaction in a reactor that continues the reaction. And the idea is it's called going critical. And you want to be right on that edge of criticality. Well, what they did is the reactor got what they call slow, had a lot of iodine, it's called iodine poisoning in it, and they started pulling out control rods to try and speed the reactor up again. And unfortunately, what happens is you have all these extra neutrons in that reactor being absorbed by the iodine, which eventually becomes a fissionable material, basically eventually becomes uranium again, and that reactor took off. So it went from 200 or actually, depending on where you read, and it went from about 30 megawatts to 200 megawatts to 3 gigawatts in about 3 seconds. And so effectively, it boiled off all the water and exploded. There's some question about whether there was actually a nuclear explosion, or what they call an incursion. But there was not necessarily the same level of a nuclear bomb, but there were secondary explosions, and effectively, spewed radioactive material up to 300 miles away.
The images are stunning. Again, it's exploringthezone.com. It certainly looks like you've attracted quite a bit of attention, and from a lot of government officials over in the UK, right?
Yes. So I've been invited to speak at Future News. So it's funny because a lot of part of it's because of my work in Chernobyl and what I've been doing there and trying to document. So the goal always was to document what had happened since the accident. There's been a lot of research, a lot of books, a lot of movies written about the accident in and of itself, but I wanted to document what had happened since the accident, met with individuals there. And then, of course, I got very involved with drones over the last 5 years. And so I have the distinction of being one of the first people ever to fly a drone in the Chernobyl zone. And so these invitations I've been getting about, sort of the Chernobyl work as well as the work with drones and how drones affect journalism and broadcast and storytelling. And so I got invited to speak at several universities in Europe, and on one of those invitations, I happen to be in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we'll be speaking next week at Future News, which is a big event hosted by the UK government.
Obviously, your ultimate goal was to get this on television or something like that, I assume, right?
Correct. And so, people always ask me, so what's the story? What's the story? What's the story? And interestingly enough, I think that a lot of people go at a story with a preconceived idea of what they want, and sometimes they miss the bigger story. On this, because it was sort of my first attempt at a large-scale documentary, I sort of let this, it's going to sound a little, hokey, I guess, but I let the story find me. I absorbed all the information. I filmed as neutral as I could, and sort of waited to see, what the story was going to be about. And so it started off being, really just about exploring the zone. And then I met an individual, Paul Christopher Green, Flight AV in Chicago, who owns a production company, and started chatting with him. And he got very excited about what I was doing, sort of infectious, I guess, if you will. And it was him and his team that really have come up with what, I think is the real story that we're going to do here. And it's called Half-Lives, Love and Energy in the Nuclear Age. And it's really about we as human beings, as a human race, have done an amazing job at in medicine. People are living much longer. People are not dying at birth. And so we have an ever-increasing population. Well, the basic necessities of human life, food, shelter, and clothing, require energy. And so so what we're going to do is really take a look at all the forms of energy and as a neutral perspective as possible, and play that against what had happened at Chernobyl, and which is an accident completely man-made, and showing sort of, if we make wrong choices, what the potential consequences are. And so at the end of the day, we want to try and show that there's not one single energy form that is the best. They all have pros and cons. I mean, nuclear, one of the facts I learned from Dr. King was that nuclear is the most dense energy form we have. The splitting of one uranium atom has 50,000 times the amount of energy of we'll just use it for equal terms, splitting of one carbon atom, burning a carbon atom in your engine. So nuclear is 50,000, but we have the problem of long-term waste disposal. Wind turbines are fantastic, but kill hundreds of thousands of migratory birds. Solar panels are great, but the sun only shines so many hours a day. So we want to show the pros and cons of all of them. And the reality is what will save us as a human race will be picking the right matrix or mix of those energy sources and reevaluating them over time. A lot of people will ask me, you must be anti-nuclear after going there and seeing the devastation and what happened to people's lives and families. And I said, I'm not anti-nuclear. I'm really anti-stupid. And unfortunately, this was a completely man-made issue. Lack of science, lack of oversight, government interference, all the multitude of reasons behind it. But also that we've chosen, in my view, probably the wrong form of nuclear energy or reactor design. There's a form called a salt reactor. A salt reactor, we did a lot of research in the 60s, but I liken it to beta and VHS in our professional world. Beta is probably better than VHS, but VHS won out. While in the nuclear world, a boiling water reactor and a salt reactor is probably better for a multitude of reasons, but a boiling water reactor won out. A couple reasons. One is in a salt reactor, it's really hard to weaponize the material. So obviously, a lot of our reactors are designed to create energy as well as create plutonium for bombs. Salt reactor is also not nearly as efficient. However, it also doesn't have a pressure vessel, so it's not pressurized. So it's a safer reactor. So all those things is what this story is going to be about, sort of set against the accident at Chernobyl. And then sort of the sub story is the love story of my wife and I. I met her 6 years ago, and just about after we started dating, that this whole concept of going to Chernobyl came up, and she really encouraged me. And of course, she had been there, had gone on several of the expeditions with me, and she went on this last one with me. And we decided that the story of Chernobyl, the people of Chernobyl, my family, again, being from the Ukraine, the last stop before coming to the States, that we wanted to do something very special for the two of us. And so we decided that we would get married there. And so there was a small village, a local priest. The head priest would not allow us because we weren't a Russian Orthodox, but one of the another priest within the zone who oversaw one of the churches said that he thought it was very special that we had spent so much time and so much dedication to the story and helping the people in Chernobyl, that he, and the fact that there was so much sadness in there, we wanted to bring a little bit of happiness, new life. And so a wedding is new life. And so we decided to get married there. So we did that as well on this last trip.
Go ahead and give as much information as you'd like out so our readers and our viewers can find this information on your video or on the project itself that you're in the midst of working on, that sort of thing, if that would be great.
Certainly. So the main information about the project and the blog is at exploringthezone.com. You can follow me on Twitter at P.G.P Images. The documentary itself, Half Lives, documentary.com, and that's half-lives documentary.com. Has more information. Of course, there'll be links on all those. You can follow me on Vimeo at PGP Images. I post various little snippets, video links to some of the different places. If you go to DJI's website currently, in their events section, there's an event on Chernobyl, and they did a story, and we did a trailer there as well. Facebook, PGP Images. And if someone wants to get a hold of me directly, they can contact me at info@pgpimages.com.
The principal of PGP Images, Philip Grossman, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us here at Broadcast Beat.
Thank you.